It is good to be with you today. I am coming from the church library at the First Presbyterian Church in San Rafael. This is a treasured window behind me. It was given in 1915 by William A. Kent in memory of his mother, Mrs. Adeline Dunton Kent. It shows the tree of life, a love of God's creation and nature. I want to step aside and show you the whole window. Today we focus on a passage from Matthew's Gospel. This was the assigned lectionary passage for today. Listen for words from Matthew's Gospel, chapter 11, beginning in verse 25. At that time, Jesus said, "I praise you, God, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and learned and revealed them to little children. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Let us join our hearts in a moment of prayer. Holy One, we hear these ancient words. May we open our hearts. May we hear your truth for us, that we might be transformed. Amen. Friends, I am weary. I know a lot of people are weary. Our nation is weary, and we are carrying some heavy burdens. And maybe our stamina is wearing a bit thin. And the noise around us and within us keeps shouting, urgency, vigilance, act now. And then we hear these words, "Come to me," Jesus says, "and I will give you rest." Rest. In this season of staying at home since March, staying at home for ourselves and for others, in this time of the pandemic, maybe we have had more time for rest than ever before, forced upon us. And yet we know there is this urgency also at this time. And maybe our question is a hypothetical: when is this less urgent time? When do we have the luxury of rest? When are we not in the largest refugee crisis since World War II? When Black and brown bodies are no longer being shot in the streets? When scientists' words about polar ice caps and our changing global climate do not feel as ominous as they do now? How do we feel in this urgent time when cases of coronavirus seem to are rising in our country, in our state, and in our county? It all feels urgent and important. So maybe we would say, Jesus, this is a nice sentiment, but aren't we supposed to be doing things? We have sharp minds and commitment. We need to be doing things. We can't only rest. Now, maybe we've been taking more naps during this stay-at-home season, but is that the same as rest? I think this concept of rest is problematic for many of us and for our culture. We believe rest is something you have to do when you absolutely can't keep going, when you're forced to stop and catch your breath so you can amp up again. We tend to reserve rest for people who are utterly depleted, recovering from surgery, or these days from the COVID-19. That's who rest is for, we tend to think. I read an article and a quote by athlete, trainer, and fitness writer Jonathan Angelini. He wrote, "From a young age, we're bombarded with the message that to be successful, we must work overtime, sacrifice our health, friends, even happiness and sanity to achieve what we want." And Meyer Friedman, the doctor who first identified the type A personality, calls this Western disease the hurry sickness. He wrote, "Exhaustion has been a status symbol in our culture. Maybe that is changing after these months of having to be at home and juggling life and slowing down and not commuting and having a different rhythm. Is it changing?" A friend told me a few years ago about a youth ministry leader that she worked with. And this young man had lupus. And she wrote, "He rests. After a youth retreat or trip, he takes the day off." He said to her, "I'm afraid my illness is seen as a legitimate excuse for rest. I don't know how to invite other people to rest without them feeling like it doesn't apply to them." He had an excuse. His rest seemed sanctioned. Oh, he has to rest or he would get sick. But we all would. If we don't rest and we don't sleep well, if we never stop mind and or body, we will get sick. It takes a toll. And even in retirement, there can be a busyness or a different rhythm. And what does rest look like? We have been a restless nation. I wonder if part of the push in recent days to reopen the country and the economy is not only so people can get back to work and make a living to support their families, but a push because people don't want to be home any longer and they don't know how to rest, be quiet, or have a sense of Sabbath. They want to be busy again in a frenetic way, maybe. So we think a lot of different ways about rest and being restless. Our text from Matthew comes from in the middle of a long rant of Jesus about how the people are missing the gift right in front of them. And I began with the part where Jesus pauses in the talking to the people and raises his face to the heavens in one of those mid-argument prayers. Like an exasperated mom or dad, he blocks out the whining for a minute, heaves a dramatic sigh, and intones, "Oh, thank you, God, Lord of earth and heaven, because you have hidden these things from the wise and the intelligent and have revealed them to the infants." Isn't that an interesting line? What do you think he might be saying about children or infants who might understand this gift he's talking about, this wisdom? To be an infant, to be a baby, is to be vulnerable, and vulnerably and simply you. At the very core, babies seem completely connected to the truth. that we belong to God, to the holy, and we all belong to each other. And they rest in that reality. We might say, my needs, if we could imagine a baby's thoughts, that they would be, my needs will be met. I can sleep when I'm tired. I can eat when I'm hungry. I can trust. I can close my eyes without fear. I am held. I belong to these people. They belong to me. The world is filled with beauty and wonder and love. I think that's what babies might imagine. Jesus doesn't come to say, come to me who are weary and carrying heavy burdens, and I will give you extra energy and the strength to power through. I will give you an edge, a do-over, a bump up. I will promote your agenda or satisfy your desires. That's not what Jesus is saying. Jesus is offering a deeper peace and rest. How do we do it? What does it mean to take on his yoke and learn from him? A yoke is a wooden cross piece that's fastened over the neck of two animals and attached to a plow or a cart that they pull. I think part of what Jesus is saying is, I will release you from your work and give you a different kind of job. I'll unhook you from all that you're dragging around and connect you up with me and what I carry into the world instead. What that might look like, to not live and carry fear and worry, but to be open to the way of God, that life is a gift and it is meant for sharing. God is the one who moves us toward connection and wholeness. This is what Jesus carries. This is what bearing his work together means. Jesus is inviting us to join in with that kind of work in the world, to be people of love and compassion and hope, not fear. I had an experience a couple mornings during this pandemic and being sheltered in place at home and worried about the virus. And part of what I had an experience of was waking up and this feeling of putting on my yoke for the day, strapping myself into the job of fixing or convincing or worrying. And this kind of worry and fear some days. And that yoke I was carrying felt like these words just kept hitting me. We are divided. Hatred is rampant. Lies are the loudest sound we hear. And I just felt like sometimes that's all I could feel and the weight I was carrying. And what if felt like these words that echoed. What if? What if all this pain and suffering continued and separation and a feeling of helplessness? And I didn't want to feel that. I wanted to take off that yoke, to be free of that. I wanted to step out of the way of being in the world and pick up a different way of being in the world. I wanted this yoke of trust. And as one friend of mine said, instead of thinking of what if, all these bad scenarios, what if we change that to even if? Even if all the things I fear happen and more, still the Holy One is the Holy One. God is still God. There is still abundance and gifts. There is still enough to go around. There is still a calling to believe that we can share, that love is the truest and biggest thing in the world, and that we belong to God and to one another. Even if some of the things I am worried about happen, those are the things that are still true. So what do we do on those days when those worries weigh us down? Taking those deep breaths and to not allow those sounds, those voices to overwhelm us, and to sit still and to hold the ones we love in the world, just to hold them. That there's love mixed with despair and love mixed with sadness, and just holding the people I love in that. And to notice when the despair starts to loosen up, when the disappointment starts to diminish, when there's sadness that moves toward compassion, and that I really do trust what is true, that deep love is always there for us, from God, in God, through God, God in us, that doesn't change, even with all the realities. To rest in that, to practice those days and moments of Sabbath time. My Sabbath day is now Saturday. I do my recording of the service and work on the final pieces on Friday. So my Sabbath day is now Saturday. I have a different rhythm. It's important, even in the shelter in place, have a different kind of few hours or a day when we turn off the news, when we soak and rest in that love and light. I love that Jewish understanding of Sabbath, the day that begins at sundown, and to believe and live into. My needs will be met. I will sleep when I need to rest, eat when I'm hungry. I can trust. I can close my eyes without fear. I am held. I belong to these people and they belong to me, and the world is filled with beauty and wonder and love. When things feel urgent and pressing and despairing, to talk faster, to do more, I know there is great work to do that we are all called to in different ways around white privilege and anti-racism, to protecting and taking action for the environment, for policies to change on immigration. There is so much work to do, but there is also a calling to stop and rest and lay down those burdens. I want to close with a translation of these verses from the Message and to hear it as our calling, an invitation. Jesus said, "Are you tired, worn out, weighed down by heaviness, bad news, fear? Come to me, and you will recover your life. I will show you how to take real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you will learn to live freely and lightly." Amen.